At Oxford University, Dr. Richard Dawkins is Professor of Public Understanding of Science. The author of several best-selling books, he is also one of Darwin's foremost defenders.
I suppose the great mystery of life is to explain where the complexity of life came from. Another way of talking about complexity is to say information. Information is a kind of measure of complexity. And the complexity of life is not just plain complexity, it's also adapted. Living things not only are complicated, but they do things, they survive. They do everything in their power to survive, and they look as though they are beautifully designed machines, machines designed to survive.
I don't think the Darwinian theory of evolution is anything like the established fact that many biologists claim. I called it the great cosmological or cosmogenic myth of the 20th century. And that's a view I still maintain. I think nothing I've seen in the biological sciences, and no advances in science that I've seen in the last 20 years, in any way have changed my mind in any way about that fundamental belief of mine that Darwinism is an inadequate explanation.
And of course the puzzling thing is, where does all this complexity come from? Where does all this information come from? It cannot come about by chance. It's absolutely inconceivable that you could get something as complicated as a bird and as well designed as a bird or a human or a hedgehog coming about by chance. That's absolutely out. Because to get from nothing, from no complexity, no information, to the extreme complexity of a modern living thing in one step of chance couldn't possibly happen. That would be like throwing a dice 1,000 times and getting a 6 every single time. It's out of the question. But if you allow a little bit of luck in any one generation, and then a little bit of luck in the next generation, a little bit of luck in the next generation, by cumulatively adding this luck, step by step by step by step, you can work from any degree of simplicity to any degree of complexity. All you need is enough time. So where's it come from? It's come from the gradual, incremental process of evolution by natural selection.
Michael Denton says it cannot be done.
One can quote lots of examples in the biological realm of things which seem, as it were, beyond the reach of that simple Darwinian mechanism. There's things like the avian lung, there's the feather, there's the amniotic egg, bacterial flagellum. I mean, really a vast number of systems which have that unique watch-like sort of complexity that you find in nature, where in fact to have the system functioning you need A, B, C, D, so forth, all in place, interlocking like together before the thing will function. It's very difficult to see how those sorts of things were arrived at undirected, by undirected.
Passes in and out of only one tube, which ends in tiny air sacs. But in birds, the air flows continually through the lungs in one direction, through a complex system of interconnected air sacs, connected up with its hollow bones. Darwinists claim that reptilian lungs changed into birds' lungs through a lot of intermediate stages. But Michael Denton says half-formed lungs won't work because the transitional form cannot breathe. Any intermediate stage would result in extinction of the species.
Well, the avian lung is an example, like the living cell or like the feather, of a highly complicated system, very, very involved, very complicated, which, as far as I can see, you can only conceive of it functioning as for respiratory gas exchange if the whole current structure and order of it is in place. One of the toughest examples in nature of a highly complex system composed of a whole lot of interacting components, all of which must be there as they are in every single bird's lung before the thing would function. In the case of the avian lung, this is, for me, a very tough nut for Darwinists to crack, because I mean I can't imagine how that sort of the lung and other analogous things like it could come about as a result of the accumulation of small random changes.
Professor Werner Gitt is a specialist in information theory and a director at the Federal Institute of Physics and Technology in Brunswick, Germany. He says the evolution of complex life forms from simpler ones by selection of lucky improvements is impossible because there is no source of new information.
A simple living being to an elephant or to a human being. It needs very much more information. And information cannot coming by a random process.
And it's the molecular genetics which finally provide the detailed evidence, the absolute knockdown evidence that nobody could possibly go against, because the molecular evidence really shows with the detail of, just like a sort of human text, you can see the changing letters, the changing words of the DNA, which are in effect describing, as generations go by, describing the anatomical changes, which are all that Darwin himself was able to see.
All examples of mutations are actually loss of information, even the favourable ones. There is no new genetic information. Claimed examples of evolution in action are actually examples of variation within a kind. Antibiotic resistance, insecticide resistance, peppered moths, all these are examples of rearrangement of existing genetic information or loss of genetic information. There's no new genetic information.
If you reject the sufficiency of chance, undirected chance, as an explanation for biological phenomena as we see them on Earth, then you have to have some form of design hypothesis. So this is the only alternative available. I think when you look at the laws of nature and you look at the cosmos, you have these two conflicting possibilities. You have the possibility of the transcendent Hebraic God who created the world and organized all the laws of nature to this end, or you have the other possibility that somehow the universe is a living whole, a self-organizing system.
In the next 1,000 years, what we're going to do is in every generation we're going to mimic natural selection by choosing for breeding those individuals which most embody the qualities that we admire. So if you can go from, say, a wolf to a Pekingese in a few thousand years, then you have to extrapolate that process and say how much further could you go in 1,000 million years.
You can breed dogs for thousands and millions of years, but if you have no source of new genetic information, they'll still be dogs. The problem with evolution is it has no way of providing new genetic information. Both natural selection and breeding, or artificial selection, cause loss of the genetic information. Natural selection does the same. If we take wolves, varieties of wolves before the Ice Age, long hair, short hair, and during the Ice Age the extreme cold resulted in the killing off of the short-haired wolves, we end up with a new variety of wolf, even a new species with long hair, which is adapted to cold conditions. But this adaptation, again, is not involving new genetic information. In fact, the process causes the loss of the genetic information for short hair. This is a fundamental problem. Mutations and natural selection both result in loss of genetic information. So there is no way that evolution of increasing complexity can occur.
It is impossible that new information is coming from a random process. If you see a computer program, it needs a programmer. If you see a car, it needs a designer. If we see the biological information in the cells, then we must say, that is the right conclusion, it needs a creator who has made the program, the genes, to create the proteins, to create the organs. It is necessary that we have this. So we can say evolution is an impossible process.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
If one were to believe the Near-Darwinian account, you would have to say that information is built up gradually in small steps, a little bit at a time. And if one examines the mathematics of this sort of thing happening, it turns out that one has to assume that at any stage in evolution that there are a large number of possible mutations that could occur, that could be adaptive. And if there are a large number, we should be able to find some today. And the fact is that we don't. All the mutations that have been examined on a molecular level show that the organism has lost information and not gained it.